Um, well, actually, the last session of our Interfaith Explorations for the winter of 2022 or spring of 2022. So, welcome back, all of you. Um, we have been meeting for 8 weeks now. Today is our eighth week. There has been a lot of joy in that session, in this session. So I'm really sad that it's ending, but also a very different session. So glad that we did that. And in this specific one, we were focusing on movies and their impact on our lives, our individual lives, our communal and societal life, and most importantly, on our spiritual growth. Me and my co facilitator, Dr. J. McDaniel, we're very grateful to the Interfaith Center for hosting these classes to process and faith and spirituality and practice for co sponsoring them. So today we have two exciting movies. I am not sure which one we are starting with. So, Jay, tell me, are we starting with Children of Heaven or would you like to start with Temple Grandin?
I think we're starting with Temple Grandin. I think.
Okay, so let's just start with it. Why don't you go ahead and start with that and then we'll come to Children of Heaven.
All right. A long time ago, when I was in college, I had never heard of anybody with autism, and I don't know that I even knew the word. But I had some friends that did volunteer work at a local institution where folks with autism were kept. And I would visit that place. And in all honesty, the people were treated terribly. Terribly. And as I look at my own consciousness too, I don't think I was especially sensitive either. But since then, I've had friends that are autistic and students that were certainly on the spectrum. And it's made me think about it a lot. And I was aware of Temple Grandin by reading about her, because I'm in worlds that are very interested in animals. So I knew about her. I think she gave a TED talk and I saw it. So I was interested when the documentary on her life came out, and I was interested how she would be portrayed. And so that's our film. It's on Temple Grandin, and I'll raise some questions for us to talk about after we see the trailer. So ready to go, Louis.
My name is Temple Grandin. I'm not like other people.
She's an amazing visual thinker.
Are you a scientist?
I used to work for NASA. Can you bring everything you've seen to your mind?
Sure.
Wow.
Can't you?
Excellent work, Temple. Really excellent work.
How'd you figure that out? He can see all around without moving his head.
How is she?
She's good.
You do remember, though, something's gonna set her off.
When was she diagnosed?
She was 4. Temple! I have done everything that I can for Temple.
We know how different she is.
Different, not less.
You have a very special mind. You know that? Think of it as a door. A door that's going to open up onto a whole new world for you. Pick a subject.
Cows? Do they have colleges with cows?
Yes, they do.
Why are some mowing more loudly than others? There must be a reason they're saying something.
Well, I reckon you could get Dr. Doolittle on out here. He probably could tell you.
Mooing. You want to do research and write your master's on mooing.
I can see a shoot just as a cattle will because that's something my autism lets me do.
You wacko.
I know my system will work because I've been through it 1,000 times in my head. My husband read about you.
Miss Grandin, this is a masterpiece.
I don't want my thoughts to die with me. I want to have done something.
It's nothing short of a miracle.
So I will say a few more words and then ask some questions. My sons, age 32 and 34, introduced me to words that I was not familiar with. And one of the words that I was introduced to by them was the word neurotypical. And indeed it was, excuse me. Could you hear my dogs? Just checking. Okay. And one, they also introduced me to the phrase, the privilege of the neurotypical. And what they meant is that you can have people that consider their way of thinking normal or typical. And then they privilege that as if that's the only way to think. And if there's another way to think that's very different and it scares them a little bit, they call that abnormal. And so they privilege their one way, juxtaposing it to the other ways which are abnormal. And my son said, you know, that's not a good way to think. Why not have multiple kinds of normative? Why can't there be multiplicity? Why can't there be lots of different cognitive styles? And if someone else's cognitive style is different from yours and scares you, you don't need to speak of it as a deficit. Simply speak of it as a style. And that whole idea stretched my mind, because as someone who believes in God, which I do, I think of God as a spacious container that includes all the differences in a way that appreciates the differences. And so if you think of a container where everything's held together in its uniqueness, and it's not a hierarchy, it's not a pyramid. There's not something on top and other things beneath that. They're all in the same field, held together in a kind of love. I'm reminded of Ibn al-Arabi and his beautiful saying, "My heart is open unto all forms. It's a pasture for gazelles, a temple for idols, the Kaaba of the pilgrim, the Torah of the Jew, a cloister for the Christians. Love is my religion, and whatsoever directions its caravans lead, I follow." Well, I would like to be a pasture for gazelles, and I bet you would too. You would like to have a really open heart that could accept the multiplicity in an embracing way without normatizing your own as privileged and superior. So that's what I bring to the Temple Grandin documentary. I want to think about multiple cognitive styles, none of which necessarily need to be called deficits. They're just different. And they're kind of beautiful in the differences. The film also, for me, and you don't have to have seen it, it's okay. It also raised for me the question of our relationship to animals. If you eat meat, if I eat meat, the animals that you eat were probably raised for slaughter, transported for slaughter, kept in a feedlot for slaughter, and then slaughtered. And those animals are our kin. They're our closest biological and spiritual kin. And we treat them horribly, particularly in industrial societies. Temple Grandin made her peace with that. But she said, but they ought to be treated humanely, even under those circumstances. So she used her skill to try to imagine and affect at least some kind of humane treatment in the feedlots and during the slaughter. Is it humane? I don't know. But is it more humane than it was before she made her changes? I think so. So those are the questions it raised for me. Moving past the privileging one mindset over others, honoring the way God is present in people whose cognitive styles are very different from my own, and then our relationship with animals. My question is, how about you? Has your life been positively changed? Has your life been enriched by someone whose cognitive style is very different from your own? Perhaps someone who's autistic. And if so, could you just share a word about that? Tell a story about that. Greg, unmute, please.
Yeah, I was trying to find the mute button. So yeah, thanks. And I'll go first. We are very fortunate here at St. Peter's in Conway to have as two of our leading, they used to be youth, they've now aged out of that, but they perform acolyte functions. They do a lot of service around the church, and both are on the spectrum at different levels. And both take such joy in doing the little things that other people would overlook. So it's taught me to pay attention to the joy that one of them gets in carrying the cross in, joy, and in taking it out, and in giving the peace where he lifts people up. And it's just my experience with Austin is kind of like be present now and appreciate everything that you are doing. And he loves generously, absolutely, completely generously. So he's a model for me as well of what I think God calls us to be. So yeah, we're very blessed.
Thank you, Greg. And I think we can kind of picture that in our minds for that vivid imagery. Anybody else just would like to share? This is the way someone who's autistic or has engraced my life. Anybody else?
Sally has a hand up.
Yeah, this is not someone I know personally, but I have frequently visited another church in a different part of the state where there's a developmentally delayed teenager. And something about a religious ritual allows people who function differently to participate fully. And this young lady, her dad drives her. I don't see any more family than just her and her dad. But she does those functions. She passes the basket for the offering, and she does things that are very routine and ritual. And it's very meaningful to her, and certainly to me, that she's able to participate and appreciated by everyone. Something particular to religious rituals, I think, that ordinary life doesn't permit.
Thanks, Sally. And the mention of ritual is really important there. I think we're thinking about themes to explore after this session. And there's a great book called The Power of Ritual that's used as in an interfaith book study in some settings. And your comment may prompt that. Carol.
Hi. Well, I think Neil and I both watched, although we've heard Temple Grandin interviewed, but we'd never unraveled the whole story of her life as she has told it. We have a grandson who's autistic. He's now graduating high school. He's brilliant, off the charts kind of academic success, but he doesn't interact as comfortably, I think, as some of his peers. But I think I learned, because you asked the question about God's universe, and I think I learned a lot about love from him in a simple way. We went for a ride in a car. Neil and I were in the back. He was sitting with his dad up front, and we chatted, but he wasn't part of the conversation. In fact, he was facing forward. And when I went to get out of the car, he ran to open the door for me and wrapped his arms around me. And I said, "Oh, that's so wonderful." And he said, "It's so wonderful spending time with you. I just love being with you." And it really stopped me in my tracks, because, we were all busy talking and he was busy loving, and reminded us of that. So that was a great, I would say, non-normative car ride, but exceptional in the learning.
Carol, can he feel your feelings? How are his social skills along those lines?
Social skills are limited. He's learned to exit himself when he feels uncomfortable. So he'll get up in a classroom and leave if, things are too noisy, or, and the school has become sensitized to that. He has learned coping skills. I think the parents of autistic in an autistic family ought to be lauded, because they've learned skills and he's learned skills, and they've worked together to lobby so that his educators learn skills, and hopefully his peers learn skills. He excels at so many things. He doesn't allow himself to enjoy all of them. He has a beautiful voice. He acts. He is intellectually gifted, I guess. And, he has so many of these skills. And when I asked him what he hoped to do at university, he said, "We'll see." I said, "Well, maybe you want to think about medicine," or he's very interested in science. And he said, "Oh, but I don't have enough biology, so I can't go on." So he sees blocks where some might resolve problems. He's frightened by the block that he encounters. And what I liked about the Temple Grandin film is that she stood for her ground. She kind of remembered that one teacher who taught her about doors, and she found those doors. And I guess I hope, as a grandmother, I'll help him find his doors. Certainly his parents have been doing that with him, but he will not, I will not hug him without first his approaching us, or we wait for his cues. He's trained us well. I don't know what he's like with his peers, because I don't see that interaction, but he's close to his siblings on his terms, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Tina?
I have worked in the past teaching with, well, actually tutoring, not so much in the public setting, because a lot of the kids that had those special needs went to special education room. But I have worked in tutoring with some autistic kids, and was just wonderfully amazed at some of their very brilliant, talents. And of course, there were the social misinterpreting or maybe not understanding some of the social cues. But in the setting I was in, which was, a pay-for tutoring setting, the sessions were not that long, and the kids really behaved themselves and never got, kind of out of hand, and were, well aware of what they could and couldn't do. But the thing that I found really, really interesting, one of the many things about the Temple Grandin story, is that how she built that box for herself, and for lack of a better word, I can't remember, it's been several years since I've seen it, a box that would kind of squeeze her when she felt anxious and would give her the comfort of almost being womb-like. And somehow, to me, that's a very precious symbol, because when you are in utero, you are confined to an extent, and you're floating in the amniotic fluid, but it's a very safe place, and you don't, I wouldn't think, as an infant, feel confined, and this also relates to the thunder jacket, which many of you are probably familiar with, which you can use with dogs that are afraid of thunderstorms and kind of like freak out. We have one of them, and it's amazing. And it wraps around them with Velcro, wraps around their middle. It's amazing how much it can calm a dog down, just to have their feel like they're being hugged. I found that to be so interesting, and her technique of how she herded the cattle through confined areas where they didn't feel like they were being herded. I mean, they weren't in a situation where there was angst for them or urgency or anything like that. It was very well planned out. I just found the whole movie very fascinating, and of course Temple Grandin very fascinating as well.
She's amazing. Anybody else want to say anything? Well, I think there were 3 themes worthy of note, for me at least. And one was her attitude toward death. And you remember when she saw first saw the horse that died, if you saw the film, she loved that horse and the horse died. And do you remember what she said? Where did it go? Where did it go? And then she saw her teacher, went to the funeral. Where did he go? Where did he go? And it was such an honest, beautiful way of encountering that reality. Nothing fancy, nothing theological, no elaboration, just that straightforward question with a sense of love, kind of. Where did it go? So I thought that was beautiful theology. And it didn't tidy it up with an answer. It left us with the question. And there's something deeply human about that. In the spiritual alphabet of the Brussels, Q is for questing. And I like to add in Q is for questioning. Questioning. A second theme was patriarchy. And it was the way she was treated by men, not only because she was autistic, but because she was a woman. And nothing that I can add to that, but I'm sure you all know that. And the third is animals, and I'll just kind of bring it up again. It's possible for some people to think of religion or spirituality or whatever word you want as somehow something uniquely human, but not having to do with our relationship with fellow creatures. You know, I can be on my little human journey to God, and I don't need to talk about my relationship with them. The horses and the pigs and the sheep and the lambs and the earthworms. What does that have to do with anything? Well, it sure had a lot to do with everything for people in indigenous traditions. You couldn't separate spirituality from your connections with the more than human world. And there needed to be some kind of reciprocity. You could kill animals, but you had to respect them. And they had to be treated respectfully. And I just got that from the film too. Did that touch anybody else about that side of the film? Here's hoping. Here's hoping.
Yeah, it did. I think it made me think about halal and kashrut, the ways in which if you have to kill, if you have to kill, then be conscious and do it in as humane a fashion as you can, which I think was what Temple Grandin was working toward, that life, we're deeply interconnected, and honoring that life was important. So it made me think of traditions that try, with their own technology, right, with their own, the tools at hand, to try and offer a respectful relationship with animals. And I think I want to add one other thing, that we have 613 commandments that we try to honor in our life. One of them is the Sabbath, which is weekly, but the other is Sar Balei Chaim, the compassion you show for animals. So it's right up there with all the other biggies, but it just doesn't have a neon light shone on it. And I think it needs to have that neon light refocused once again, but it is an equal commandment to many of the others, the holidays, the festivals, but your relationship to animals is one of those as well. And we never eat without a blessing before and a blessing after, so that you don't ever take that interdependence casually.
I think a couple more. Darlene and Davenport?
Yep.
You go first.
Okay. I was thinking about that movie about Kiss the Ground and about the desire and the help of putting the cattle back on the grassland. And I think this movie really fits well with that. And this is a brilliant movie. I just forgot about it. I'm so glad that you brought it back for us to focus on. And what an amazing story. And what a opportunity that really did manifest with the help of so many people. And I think it's so interesting about how just straightforward and kept moving forward in the face of all that jacking around those cowboys were putting on her. And she just, they eventually have to respect that. She's just not flustered by all that stuff. Totally unmoved by it. Just kind of inspiring.
Thanks. And okay, Darlene and Greg, and then we're going to shift gears. Darlene first, if you don't mind.
Well, I just really enjoyed watching the relationships with her, like her mother, and her aunt, and the teacher. Those three really had such an impact on her. I really identified with the mother. And
did you?
Oh, I just thought it must have been so very hard for her to watch her daughter suffer, and especially at the funeral. I thought, and at the end there, where she gave her, stood up and gave her little speech to the autistic conference, and it's very good movie.
Thanks, Darlene. Greg.
Yeah, mine will be short. I just a couple of thoughts. One is as you talk about relationship to animals, of course, I go back to Genesis 1:26 and the word dominion, and trying to understand what dominion over the animals means. And I think that's something that that is worthy of much further understanding, because to me, dominion connotes a kind of caretaking, stewardship, as opposed to do what I say, that's ownership. And then secondly, when this movie came out or right around it, I remember seeing some book, and I forget what it's called, that talked about that they were positing that the number of people that we see on the spectrum is an evolution toward a new way of thinking. So as opposed to them being the outliers, we are the outliers because we're the old way of thinking, and that there's a new way of communicating that may be emerging. So anyway, interesting thought.
Very interesting. Well, thanks to everybody for your comments and your interest and concern. And I want to say one word about open doors and then turn it over to Sophia. But you know that this is partially sponsored by a group called Process and Faith. And the understanding of God in process thought, we meet God through fresh possibilities for responding to the situation at hand, whatever it is. And God doesn't cause the situation, but God offers the fresh possibilities for taking a step forward, given what has happened. And that can be the genetic conditions of your life or the family you're brought up into. It can be anything. But when I watched this, when I saw those open doors, she responded to several fresh possibilities, several open doors. And that is the way it is for us too, when we're at our best. All right. I love Sophia's movie. I loved it so much. I watched it last night with my wife and went to sleep on it, dreamt on it. Your turn, Sophia.
So let's have a discussion on it, Jay. I'm glad you'll be facilitating it. So I promised everybody not promised, but I mentioned that I would be picking something from Pakistani cinema because I'm visiting Pakistan and I really wanted to highlight that and bring something to you all. So what happened was I've been here 2 weeks. And when I come here, I'm generally I don't live in a hotel. I don't have a rental car. I come here and I live in my family home, the home where I was raised, where I grew up, where I went to school from and college from. So I still live there, and my brother and his family lives here, and they take care of me as much as they can of all my needs and the things that I need to do and chores that I need to run and people I need to meet and places I want to see and shopping I want to do. And I do it every year, sometimes twice or 3 times a year without giving it a second thought. And this time when I was here, my daughter was here with me. And she was taking a break on vacation and we both visited Pakistan together. And a week into my trip, she commented, she was like, "Mom, it's just amazing the way your brothers take care of all our needs and the way they put their lives on hold to do so much for you all the time." And that gave me a pause because I actually never thought about it. I thought, that's the norm. I mean, that's how we grew up. And that reminded me of this movie, which was not what I intended. And I have not seen it recently. I saw this movie 20 years ago, sometime when it came out and it was nominated for Best Foreign Movie. But my daughter's comment about the relationship that we have, me and my brother, it reminded me of this movie, which I thought was one of the sweetest movies I've ever seen and full of joy. So I thought we will finish our spring session on a movie that I find so joyful. So I hope some of you were able to see it. Louis, let's look at the trailer real quick and maybe then we can watch another clip of the movie.
His sister has always depended on him. His parents have always trusted him. But something has just gone terribly wrong. Now, to reclaim his sister's most prized possession, he'll have to travel throughout the entire city on a one-in-a-million adventure. Miramax Films invites you to a magical motion picture in the tradition of Kolya, My Life as a Dog, and Cinema Paradiso.
Thank you, Lois. Can you hear me? Jay, you're muted. You're trying to say something, but you're on mute.
There's a little static that people have noticed, but we can live with it. If it's me, my apologies. But you need to live with that too.
Can you tell if it comes when I'm unmuted?
It does. It's okay though.
Okay, let me see if I can make it slightly better. Hopefully.
It must be the distance.
Well, I hope this one. Do you still hear it? Well, that's all I could do, so I hope it made a difference.
It's not. It's utterly livable. No problem.
Okay, I am so sorry. It's probably the connection or the distance. So, this movie is a sweet, sweet story of a brother and sister who are living in 1997 Iran and who are forced to share one pair of shoes when the brother accidentally loses his sister's shoes. And I just find it so joyful of how the both siblings came up with the solutions to the problems that they face, and every solution brings about more problems, and how they find solutions for those problems, and how they kept their solutions very much to themselves and away from the parents, because they are so keenly aware, even in spite of the fact they're kids, but they're so keenly aware of the financial problems that parents are facing, so they keep all those problems away from the parents. Louis, can you show us the clip, one of the clips of the movie?
فردا یه سری به این فروشگاه ادارتون بزن، شیر بچه تمام شده، براش یه قوطی شیر بخر.
نگران نباش. زن رحم آقا دیسک کمر داشت، رفت عمل کرد بدتر شد. میگن دیسک کمر رو نباید عمل کرد، باید باش مدارا کرد.
یعنی میگی چی کار کنه؟ دست به سیاه سفیدم نزنه.
خب دکتر گدلان کرده دیگه. شما کار نکنید، هر کاری باشه من و بچه ها هستیم، انجام میدیم.
یعنی کوکب خانم میگفت خواهرشو بردن عمل کردن، الان خوب شده.
شما این فکر عمل از مغزتون بیرون کنید. من نمیخوام شما ناقص بشه بیافته توی خونه. انشالله اضافه کارمو که بگیرم یه خونه اجاره میکنم که پله نداشته باشه هی پله ها رو بری بالا بیای پایین من یکی از دوستانم همکار من توشه چچه با هم هستیم هر موقع که مریض بشه اصلا به دکتر نمیره تمام از این داروهای گیاه استفاده میکنه همیشه هم از این داروهای گیاه راضیه میگه داروی گیاه بخورم خوب میشم
چی بگم؟
Thank you, Lois. This scene is so hilarious, so beautiful for me, and at the same time, so real. Although the movie is set in a very different background, it's Iran. I grew up in Pakistan. Very different socioeconomic classes. I didn't grow up in this kind of poverty, but still, um, the power of the familial love and the story of the children, it is so real and so believable in this scene for me. And then, of course, there are so many other things that I love about this movie, especially how it presents the life through the eyes of children who care for each other and who are willing to cope with any social or financial issues as long as they're together, which is quite amazing. And their personalities, I mean, they're so strong, so strong personalities. And at the same time, what strikes me is that the film shows in a very simple way that how spiritual children are and how spiritual their lives are, and not very different from adults, and they suffer as profoundly as adults, and their enormous capacity for love and joy and compassion, and of course their resilience. So I didn't prepare any questions. I thought I would invite you all. For those who have seen the film, I would invite you to respond to it and think about it and see if it reminds you of any story of your own childhood, a vivid story of joy or love or compassion. And for those who have not seen the film, I just want you to reflect and reminisce on your own childhood and share an experience of sheer joy or share a story when you overcame a challenge with a loved one. But as you think about it, don't share it from your perspective now. Instead, share it from your perspective as a child. Because that's another thing I saw in the movie, that, sometimes some things which are very, very trivial to us, they're really important. They're a matter of life and death for children. And their emotions are as strong and as vivid as we as adults are. So I want you all to take a few moments to go back a few years or decades and think about your childhood and see if you would like to share something in response to this movie that you saw or didn't see.
I always think I'm the first one to jump in, but the movie was so tender. And as you think about your brothers, I was the older sister, a younger brother, and my parents were immigrants. So I had the feeling that I was taking care of the whole family, which of course wasn't true. But in my child's mind, I could speak faster, I could pick up innuendos, I could interpret and protect. And one not so joyful image came to me. And that was, my mother was diagnosed with an illness, and I accompanied her to the doctor. I don't know how old I was, 11 maybe. And he gave her a definition, which I wrote down, but told them that I lost. And then I looked it up in an encyclopedia, a medical encyclopedia, and tore the page out, thinking that I would keep that information from them to protect them. And, of course, that's a child's eye. And, but the movie brought back those memories of how small we were, how little we are, and yet how much we internalize about the reality of our families, and where we feel we can take on those responsibilities to assist or protect or enable. So it brought back tender and sad and joyful memories at one time. So thanks for bringing it forward. It's a bittersweet kind of memory.
Nita, thank you. Thanks, Carol. Nita.
One of the memories that popped into my head was when I was I have an older brother, 2 years older than me. And we're really from different planets, maybe different parents. I don't know. I was always told I was adopted by him. So anyway, I had beautiful, long, strawberry blonde hair. And my brother told me, and I usually wore it in pigtails when I was a little girl. And he told me that if he cut one of my pigtails off here at the base, that he could put it back on if we played beauty shop. And so I agreed, and he cut off one of my pigtails. And we got into such trouble over it. And what I remember, though, about it was we were both in trouble, me for letting him do it, him for doing it. But my brother stood up for me, and he said to my mom, "She's just a little girl. I convinced her to do that, and it's really my fault. And I want you to love her anyway." And of course, my mom did love me anyway, but she completely backed off, and neither one of us really ultimately ended up getting into trouble because he was so tender in my behalf. And I always impressed me that he did that for me.
Anybody else? Greg.
Yeah, you made me think the example in the movie and the question, the prompt about what went on in our lives. When I was young, I have an older brother, younger sister, and we were aged 13 through 8. And on Saturday nights, my parents would regularly go out and leave us home to fend for ourselves. And that was a time that we played together, laughed together, ate terrible kids' foods together and stuff, but it became the high point of the week. And it was really a point of sort of consistency and solidity in a life that was surrounded by a lot of chaos. And so we bonded very tightly as a result of that. And it helped us through some later years and continues to help us.
Does anybody have a secret that they shared with a young friend that was just between the two of you and you never told anybody until now? I do, and I just wonder if anybody else did. I have my sister was 7 years older, so we don't have those kinds of memories, but I certainly had friends my age, and I was just, this whole thing made me think about a secret that I shared with a friend. I'll tell you now, this is a historic moment. We were playing on the side of the road, and there were stones, rocks, and we thought it would really be neat when cars drove by. We were probably 6, to see if we could hit a car with a stone, in particular a hubcap. and a woman drove by, and we threw one of those stones, and it hit her hubcap. She stopped. She got out of the car. We were scared to death. She came up to us and she said, "What's your name?" And I said, "My name," and his name, I can't tell you who he was. I said, "My name, J. McDaniel." And she said, "I know your father. And if you ever do anything like this again, I will tell him." And I never did that again. But my friend, his name was Bruce, we had that little secret that we'd kind of done a bad thing, and it was pretty bad. But we'll never tell anybody, least of all will we ever tell my father. So I was wondering, do you have any things like that, just with your brother or sister or friend, that just because, who knows if those two kids in the film ever told their parents about what they'd been through? Who knows? How about you? This is your chance for confession. Sophia, at the end of the movie, do you have a secret, Sophia?
I was just going to say there were so many times when I got my younger brother. I have an older brother and a younger brother. I got him out of trouble so many times, and my parents have never ever learned about that. They never will. My father's already passed away, but now I do take a lot of joy in sharing some of those secrets with his children and telling him how their father got into trouble, and I would be there to help him get out of it and to make sure our parents never learn about them. So yes, that was a part of life. So you were about to ask something, Jay.
Oh, I want you to tell us something tell us one of those secrets. No, I'm teasing, unless you'd like to. So here's really my question. At the end of the movie, am I right that the father went and purchased 2 pair of shoes? Did anybody see that besides me? One for the girl and one for the guy, I think. There were some red ones. Is that right? Or did I misread that? My wife and I went back and looked again and again. Are those shoes? And we decided they were. Was that right?
Yeah, that's what happens in the end. The father goes, because he made that extra money gardening, he went and bought 2 pairs of shoes. So both the children did get rewarded, and rightfully so, with brand new pairs of shoes. And the pink one for the daughter, which is very important because remember, she was constantly concerned about wearing boy shoes, which she didn't want to. Yeah, so she got pink shoes in the end. Yes, you are right.
So I wanted the movie to end where the father comes out with the 2 pair of shoes, and they raise their hands in delight and take those shoes, and it's a perfectly happy ending. But it didn't end like that. Do you remember how it ended? He lost the race, and she looked at him, and he couldn't speak to her. And her mom calls, and she goes back to help her mom. So it ended in that way, rather than with this kind of victory of a sort. Does anybody have a way of thinking about that? My wife turned to me and she said, "Jay, what's going on there?" And I said, "I think that's life." I don't think that resolution is always the end of life. I think life is like that. Sometimes there's unresolved things, but there's still the beauty. I don't know about what did you think of that?
That's a very interesting question, Angie. I didn't think about it. Now, when I think about it, Zara, the girl, is constantly the victim of the story, but she never acts like one. And there are victory moments in the movie, but the director never shows them like that. It's just everyday life. And without any, the story is about loss, but it doesn't talk about loss and gains in ways that we do now. It's more focused on the power of love and how you deal with loss and gain. That's how I looked at it, and that's the beauty of the movie for me, personally.
That helps.
So, before we close today's class, I want to thank all of you who have been attending this session on Zoom, but I also want to take a moment to thank all of you who could not attend on Wednesdays but did make an effort to saw the YouTube recordings later on. So thank you so much for being there when you watch this program. All of our classes are available on our YouTube channel. Now, I also want to tell you all that there is a collective effort to pray for the victims and the refugees from the Russian and Ukraine war and conflict. That service will be held at St. Mark's Episcopal Church on Sunday at 5 p.m. We will have lots of prayers. There will be time for reflection, and we will be ending on a Ukrainian hymn. And you do have an opportunity to sing it together with us if you come early. I don't have the full program yet, but Lois will be sending out an email on Friday with the full program about the peace service for Ukraine on this coming Sunday. And having said that, thank you so much for being a part of our religion and film series. As we all experienced, at least I did in the last 8 weeks, that they both are very powerful mediums to convey our values and beliefs and also give us hopes and dreams. And of course, both religion and film has transformative power. So thank you so much for being a part of this series. Jay and I will be sending you a brief evaluation survey within a week, and we hope you fulfill it because that will give us good ideas on what we are going to do next in our next session. And having said that, salam, peace, and shalom to all of you. See you in our next session.
And Louis, you did such a great job.